Okay, in this example, we're going to export an existing X-ray test. We're going to use the simple four corners benchmark. And then we're going to edit that to make a change, make our own benchmark, and then upload that back into X-ray just so we can see how easy that is to do. So I downloaded the zip file, and when I unzip it, I see a whole bunch of test files, some of which are FIO files, which this is, and then there's a YAML file which controls the overall benchmark. So I'm just editing this FIO format file, and I changed the IO size from 8K to 32K, so that's going to be my new test. Now, the next thing I need to do is just edit this test.yml file, which is a YAML file, and that is the thing which tells X-ray what this test is all about. So in this case, I'm just changing the wording here to the description and everything to indicate that I've changed my four corners test into just a straight up 32K random read test. So these textual strings here are what appear in the X-ray UI, so I want to make sure that they make sense so I can tell which of my tests I'm actually looking at here. So I'm just changing the description, and a little bit later on I'll go down and actually change the workload itself to run just my 32K IO test rather than the full four corners test, which is the thing I've based this on. So just doing some text editing here in VI, and yep, so all I'm doing is running the random read workload for 1 minute on all VMs, so that can stay the same. The thing I just scrolled past there was the VM configurations. That's staying the same, but what I am going to change is the workloads that actually run. So again, the four corners workload does random read, random write, sequential read, and sequential write. I'm editing this just to make a 32K random read test, so I just need to go and delete some of these other bits of the workload that I'm no longer using, so we can get rid of the sequential read, write, and random pieces. So I'm just going to mark those up in VI, scroll down and delete those. There we go. I'm going to do a cluster cleanup at the end, and I'm going to pre-fill it, and I'm going to do a warm-up. So I'll leave those, but again, I don't need to. I'm going to remove these other workload pieces that I'm not going to run. So okay, that all looks good. Oops, I think I made a typo here. Yep, 32K rando. Probably want to make that the actual word random. Yep, looks okay. So let's write that back. And we switch over to the X-ray UI itself, and we click on the gear icon there, and we say, hey, okay, I want to upload that new custom test. So it's going to navigate me. It just popped me back into the place I was last editing, so that's good. And I upload all of those files. I don't need all of them, but it's just simpler to upload them back all. So I just flick back here because it doesn't automatically refresh, unfortunately, just now. Anyway, so I look for the word simple. There's my test, and I need to tell X-ray where I want to run it. Gary Lab Cluster is a cluster that I've set up in the past. So I say, okay, run my new test against that particular cluster, and off it goes. So the first thing X-ray does, which is quite nice, it says on the screen there, precondition. And what that is X-ray will actually go to the cluster and make sure that it's capable of running this test. But then it clones the VMs, powers them up, it's ready to run the workload, and now the first thing it does is it pre-fills a whole bunch of I/O. And if you don't want to do a pre-fill, you can do that. The only thing is with systems that don't write zeros, you'll get a weird result. So we actually pre-fill that with a bunch of random junk in our files. Again, as I say, you can choose to skip that if you want. Then we do a little warm-up because we want to measure the steady state. So we do a warm-up. Again, you can delete that stage if you would prefer. And once the warm-up is done, then we actually start running the workload, and this is the piece we measure. So what you'll see in a minute is this graph popping up. Okay, here we go. Here's the number of IOPS that this thing is achieving. I think this test runs for a couple of minutes. Okay, looks like even though we did a warm-up, we still started off a little bit lower. It's increasing. It looks like we started to reach a steady state here. I'm squinting at this screen. I think that's 150,000 IOPS at 32K, which isn't too bad. So this will run, and the graph will update in real time for us. So not really much happens here because we're just running a simple 32K read test. There are no interference workloads, there are no power failures. This is basically as simple as you can get. And X-Ray can do many more sophisticated things here, but I think it's worthwhile to start simple and just say, okay, how do I do a 32K random test? And this is, what I should say actually, this is running on all 4 nodes of my cluster. So I have a 4-node cluster here. This test is running on all 4 nodes simultaneously. And notice I didn't really have to do anything to set up the VMs. I just specified what those VMs were in my YAML and FIO files, upload it to X-Ray, click go, and it goes and provisions those disks for me, provisions those VMs with the specifications. If I wanted to have larger disks, I could do that. Or if I wanted to have fewer disks per VM, I could do that too. So it's really quite nice. It takes a lot of the error-prone steps out of benchmarking. So when I'm benchmarking, I really want to concentrate on what's the workload I'm generating, what's the experiment I'm trying to do, and I don't really want to have to get too involved in remembering to clone VMs and clean things up and all that kind of stuff. X-Ray takes all of that drudge work away from me, which is really great. Alright, so like I said, nothing much is happening here. IOPS continue to climb. Looks like we're warming some caches or metadata or something, so it looks like we're just over 200,000 IOPS here. It's pretty decent. Typically don't see that sort of requirement for most things. Okay, so the workload is finished. And now another thing that X-Ray does nicely for me is it goes and cleans up all those VMs. So if I were to rerun this test right now, I would get a pretty similar result, which is quite nice. Again, another thing I don't have to worry about as a performance tester. So that's it. That's a very quick, easy test in X-Ray. I took an existing test, I exported it, I edited it to make a new test in my own description, uploaded it, ran the test, executed it, and saw the results come out. So that's X-Ray in a nutshell.